Hi everyone, it's Tonya Gibbs, and today I want to share with you a mixed media layout process video featuring products from Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft. This is part of my Summer 2014 Guest Design Team series. We're going to use the gelatos today in the blueberry, green tea, tangerine, and lemon. We're also going to use the Essential PITT Artist Pens in black. I'm going to use the medium point. We're going to use the Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen Black number 199. I'm also going to use the Textural Accents in the Whip Spackle and the tool set, the Gelatos Mist Maker set. I'm going to use the spatula. So we're starting out with just a standard piece of cardstock, and I have placed a little bit of the lemon gelato there on the side and moistened it, and now I'm going to paint it on and then rub it in. I wanted to see if I could create a kind of watercolored effect here, drippy kind of thing. I really wasn't sure where I was going to go with this layout at this point. The photographs were already in my mind. I knew I wanted to use those, and my idea for this was to mimic the color of the car on the choices of colors that I picked. So I'm trying to keep this kind of pastel, but then on the same respect, I wanted it to have that pop of vibrant color since this was going to be a masculine layout. So I'm experimenting with different methods of placing the pigment down on the paper. So I start out, since the cardstock is a lesser quality cardstock, it's not watercolor paper. I started out with it with the paintbrush with the water, just because I was afraid that if I tried to do too much blending on the cardstock itself with the first layer, the paper would bead up, and it did. But once I got the first layer of gelatos down, I didn't have to rub so hard to blend, so I was able to come back with more pigment and blend with a baby wipe and with my fingers. My idea here is to create movement on this layout using Cheveron. So I've grabbed out the stencil from Tim Holtz, the Cheveron stencil, and I'm using some white, just strips of cardstock. This is just out of my scrap pile to mask off the other two sizes of the chevrons on the stencil, and I'm going to focus on the big one for now. I'm using the whip spackle to add a little bit of depth to this so that it's raised up off of my layout. Now, the thing I like about these stencils is that there's 3 different sizes of chevrons, so you'll see me, I'm going to utilize that, and just a minute, I'm going to use those other 2 sizes as well. So I'm changing the direction of the chevron for the top part because, like I said, I want to generate movement. He's in the photograph, my nephew is 2, or not even 2 yet, and he's laying on the floor with these little cars, and we had such a kick out of him playing with them. So he's spinning them around in a circle, and he's making the vroom sound all the whole time. I mean, it's the most adorable thing ever. And so I want to create that same directional movement, and that's why I chose these little chevrons. Arrows are great for masculine layouts, and they're also, these chevrons are great for masculine layouts. So you'll see me use those as my imaging choices today. I'm using the spatula from Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft as well, and I'm just picking up little pieces of stray whip spackle with that spatula. The thing I like about this whip spackle is it is super lightweight, like super lightweight, and it doesn't flake off your layouts like some modeling pastes do. So I think it's a really high quality, and I love the way it is whenever it's finished on my layouts. It doesn't flake, like I said, and you can easily color over the top of it without it becoming flaky and heavy. So I really love the whip spackle. I probably will never go back to modeling paste simply because the whip spackle is that fantastic. So anyway, so I'm going to continue to add some more of these little chevrons here and there, and notice I'm changing the direction of them. Some are going up, some are coming down, kind of like what you would visualize movement on a road. This is like a little yellow pastel road for me. And again, it's just fun, and the arrows are super fun too. So now we're gonna move on to, my idea was to take these photographs and cut them out into a circle shape. I rarely cut my photos into shapes. It's just a little thing for me. I just rarely do it. So this will be fun and something different. I cut these out of a really thin chipboard. They were circled, the Spellbinders large circle dies, and the chipboard is just serving mostly as a placeholder at this point. You'll see how it interacts. So I've just temporarily glued it down with a very little bit of the Scotch ATG tape. Now I'm taking the Tangerine Gelato and a little bit of water and a detail brush, and I'm using the Tim Holtz Splatters stencil. I could have just splattered this onto the layout, but I wanted it to be very specific. So this stencil helps me to control where the splatter goes. So I'm going to add it to that right hand corner. Then I'm going to come over and add a little bit to the left. I love the look of the warm orange on top of the bright yellow. So, and again, I'm coloring right over the top of the whip spackle. So where the whip spackle is, the pigment is a little lighter. And confessions, I did come back and add like a couple of layers of this as it dried, so that I would get a richer tone of pigment. And then you notice that I wanted that splatter look, but I just wanted a little small amount. So what I did was I used the small stencil first, and then I went back and traced in the splatter effecty part of the second section of the stencil. So here you can see I went back over it, and you can see how it's really bright. And I did this with all three of them. I'm not sure if I left it on video or not, but oh, I did. So it just adds a little bit more pigment, but I would suggest waiting until the gelatos do dry, so that you're just getting a richer tone. Since we're wetting these gelatos down, they do become a little bit more translucent with water. Now I'm just using my paintbrush to create some little splatters around the page. Again, splatters indicate movement. So now I'm going to come back with the blueberry gelato, and again I've watered it down so it's more pastel and translucent, and I'm going to paint over the top of some of these chevrons. And that's just going to help to bring them up to the foreground a little bit, give them a little more depth. I am not going to paint all of the chevrons, only a few of them. I do like the look of the white on the yellow, and like I said, I wanted to keep with the primary colors as much as possible, but I like the softness. Since this is a baby, even though it's masculine, I still want to keep it kind of soft. I think I could spend hours just doing these little teeny tiny details like this. Again, I just taken that blueberry and adding some to the chevrons up at the top. I love the way the gelatos actually paint right over that whip spackle. Now I've come in with the green tea, and I'm adding a little bit of it to some of these other chevrons. Notice that I'm lifting the circles every now and then to make sure that the pigment goes under the circle, so that it looks finished. And that's why I just temporarily placed it on. One nice thing about doing these circles this way is that they're serving as my placeholder for my photograph without, when I'm messing with all of this wet medium, if I put my photograph on right away, I would end up with my photos being ruined. And also, it helps me to reserve the space, because I'm one of those individuals that cannot leave white space. Like, I struggle with it a lot. So by placing these down, it reminds me that I can't fill this space up. I need to add my photos in here. So now I'm using the Stampendous Mish Mesh stamp and my Stampers Big Brush Artist Pen to paint it up, and I'm going to add the texture to the background. Now, to me, this looks like tire tracks. I don't know. I really love the effect that this is getting at this stage. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I know sometimes people struggle with masculine layouts, but for me, more messy it is, the better for a masculine layout. So anyway, the Stamper's Big Brush Artist Pen helps me to color in that stamp. It will dry permanent. It goes on temporary, but it does dry permanent. So I will be able to come back with my wet mediums again and add more if I need to. So now I'm just pulled out a piece of scrap paper from my stash, and I'm going to take the blueberry and gelato and color it up. And then I'm also going to color the backside with the green tea gelato. And I'm adding a couple of layers, and then I'm going to take a baby wipe and work the pigment in. The more layers you add, the darker the pigment, and they do dry just a little bit lighter colored than what you see. So I'm using both sides of the paper. You'll see why in just a few minutes. And again, just dry it really well before you go to the next step. I just wanted it really good and dry. Use those scraps whenever you have an opportunity. I really, that's one thing I like about the gelatos is that I can go to my scrap pile, pull out some white, and then really make it work. Because I can just add the pigment from my layout. Now I'm using an old Crafter's Workshop stencil here. This is called Arrows. I think it's stencil number 90. So I've had it for a really long time, and I'm just tracing some of those arrows onto that strip of paper. And now I'm just going to fussy cut them all out so that I have now created an embellishment for my layout. And then I'm going to take the Essentials PITT pen and I'm in the medium, and I'm going to trace around those arrows. And that's just going to kind of help to give you a bounding area for them. And also, I think it makes them a little more whimsical and fun. So I'm just going to find placement on my road here for my arrows, and then I'm going to use my Tombo mono adhesive to adhere them down. I was debating on adding pop dots behind them to raise them up a little bit, but I've decided that I want to use the pop dots on my photo, and I want that to really be the highest point in the layout, so I went ahead and left these flat. Uh, so I've cut out some just scrap pile. Go to your scrap pile as often as you can, but I have the die from Tim Holtz that's called Block Talk. And I love how long these letters are because you can use some really nice sized letters, but they're super thin. So you can add really fantastic look to your titles. So I've used some somewhat cheap cardstock. I guess this was just in a scrap pile. It's really thin. It's almost what I would call glorified paper, not really thick enough for cardstock. So I've cut the letters out for my title 4 times. I don't put you through the pain of watching me put all 4 layers on, but what I do is I accentuated the O in the word vroom because I know it's misspelled, but I wanted it to be like him. Again, it just creates that almost that loud yelling that you were hearing as he was moving those cars around the carpet. I tried to like go up and down with the letters, but then decided I just really like the look of them all blocked and squared off. So what I'm doing here is I've accentuated my title in this bright red. Again, it sticks with my primary colors and it makes them super bright. And it calls attention to the title. Now I'm taking my Essential PITT Artist Pen and I'm in the medium point and I'm outlining around the titles. On this, I've only laid 1 layer of the lettering down. Do that with your first layer because then if you happen to draw over the top of your letter, it's no big deal because we're going to cover it up anyway. So I'm going to trace around every single one of these letters and then I'm going to come back and glue down on top of these letters the next layer and then the next layer and then the next layer. And that's going to give my title a little bit of pop and a little bit of depth and dimension as if I used a really thin chipboard basically on these letters. So I really like the look of this. Uh, it just makes for a really nice touch, but it's not as thick as the chipboard that you see there. So now you can see I'm just laying those down right on top. And again, I did 4 layers. I don't think I show in video all 4 layers, but I did do 4 layers. Now I've cut out a circle of, again, a piece of scrap yellow cardstock, and I'm taking that die, placing it back onto the circle, and then I used my Essentials pen in the medium to trace the inside of the die, which left me a really perfect circle. And again, it just kind of reinforces the outlining that I have there on the arrows. So I love that look. That's going to be my journal spot for this layout. And I'm just going to use that essential pen to write. I think these are like my favorite pens to use over the gelatos, especially. I find that the thinner, finer points don't write as well, so the medium just seems to be my go-to pen for writing over the gelato areas. And it makes for a really nice journaling pen as well. So I've got my journaling in there, and I'm talking about, this is Gage, and he's playing with his cars on the floor. Now I'm going to add the date to this layout, and I'm just going to use a standard office supply date roller stamp, and I'm going to use my Stamper's Big Brush Artist Pen in the black, and just paint that up and stamp it down there at the bottom. And to keep with that messy theme, I'm going to stamp it a couple of times without re-inking. And then I decided that I needed to add it just a little heavier. So I'm going to try and stamp right over that so it just is a little heavier tone. Love it. Love the look of that. Absolutely love it. So there's the date is on the layout. And now I've decided that my arrows are just a little too clean. So what I did was I painted the mishmash stamp, and then I blotted it onto my work surface, and then I used it over the arrows. The blotting it off first kind of keeps it a little lighter. It's not so rich. So I'm getting a second generation stamp. And then that way, when I stamp over my title and I stamp over my journaling, I don't end up covering up too many details with that rich black tone. Also, off camera, I forgot to show you guys, I forgot to hit the on button again. I did take that Stamper's Big Brush Artist Pen and trace around all my arrows and my circles, so that I had that same outlining, and it really helped to pop those areas up. And notice I did it before I added my photograph. I've taken my photos and I've cut them out with the same Spellbinders dies. Now when I cut them out to keep them from marring up my photos, I did place a piece of tissue paper on top of the photograph before I cut it out. Now, don't think I'm crazy, but I'm adding some 3D black foam tape to the top of my nephew. Yes, I'm giving him the chicken pox, but with great reason. As you can see there on the right, I have fussy cut out a second image, and I'm going to place that right over the top of the dots. So he looks like he's actually rolling those cars out of the bounding box of that circle. So it really is going to give some depth and interest to my photographs. This also, I just want to note that, babies move pretty fast, and the camera, I had gotten him out of frame a little bit, and I had cut a part of his head off in the photograph. So if you do that, I know that sometimes this happens, but just a really cute picture of the expression on the face or something. The easiest way to mask that is to cut them out in circles like this, or to use a frame with your photograph, and then frame off that area of the head. So that's a way you can use those. Now I've decided I really don't like the starkness of the white over on the right hand side of this layout. And again, it's just a matter of preference. I just struggle with white space a lot, as you guys can tell. So I'm going to come back with that lemon gelato and add that pigment back over there onto the right hand side. Again, I like it because my eye was going to that big, bold white area instead of staying with my photograph. So this just kind of helps to tone down that white a little bit, and I don't know, it just kind of helped my eye settle a little more on my photograph and the space over on the right. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and just add that over on that area um, to the right there, that little negative space. It helps me get in with the fine details and finish coloring that up. I don't know why I do that, but I can't leave white space. I see layouts and they look fantastic, but for me it's just not finished on my layouts when I do it, so I end up covering it up. I am very proud of myself though because I did not over embellish this layout. I did leave that space as negative space over on the left even though I colored it in. So I decided it just needed a little more pigment, so I'm coming back with my lemon and adding a little bit more. I didn't want to smear anything that was over on that right hand side. It wasn't all completely dry yet, so I'm using my paintbrush for the finer details just to be careful not to get into areas I didn't want to get into. And again, maybe it's just that I could do this for hours. I don't know. It's just I like to play, I like to paint, and that's just basically what I did here. I just kept painting pigment on. So, again, just adding a little more color there. So I was waiting for my other picture to print, and then I don't know, I just liked all that yellow, so I just kept adding it. I know. Anyway, I can hear all you guys now. Stop! But anyway, so I realized my photo's finally finished printing, so I've die cut it out and added it there to the bottom. And this is what I mean by not so perfect photography. Notice that his head was cut off, but when you add him to the circle, it really doesn't you don't notice it as bad. So now I'm taking some hot glue and just adding it to the bottom of that chipboard, and that's going to help to secure it to my layout a little more. The ATG tape just was temporary because I wasn't sure if that was where I wanted to leave everything until I had cut everything out. Now I didn't torture you into watching me put all the pop dots down on this second photograph, but um, there I've fussy cut out my nephew and added him back to the top, and you can see how his little hands reach out past the circles and into the negative area of the layout. So now I'm going to take that essential medium pen again, and I'm just going to trace around the outline of my layout. And notice that I'm keeping my pen hand steady, and then I'm pushing the paper up with my other hand, almost like you would on a sewing machine. I think that kind of helps a little bit. And I'm going to go around it a double line just like I did with the last layout that I shared. I really think that this kind of helps to give your eye a place to say, hey, this is the end, bounce back to the center. And I like the look of the whimsical look of the outlining. And it sort of reinforces the outlining I did on my elements as well. So here's a close-up of the little mixed media sections of the layout, and there you can really see his hand popped up and the depth there. I love this technique for a photograph. What a fun masculine layout for a little boy. It's so fun. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And as always, there will be links to the blog posts and the product list down in the description box below. Thank you for your sweet comments, and please be sure to share this with a friend.